Hi guys, it's me again. We're going to go over the person, environment, occupation model of practice. Finally getting this to you. Sorry for the delay. I had to switch computers because now my audio is not working. But anyway, it's always an excuse. PEO model of practice. Here we go. So the person, environment, occupation model is offered as a tool for therapists to use in client-therapist alliances and to enable clients to successfully engage in meaningful occupations in chosen environments. Mary Law developed this model back in 1996, and it was built for therapists so that they could have a practical, analytical type of tool, and it was to analyze problems in occupational performance, to guide intervention planning and evaluation. It was used for clearly communicating occupational therapy practices. It was used in hospitals, in the community, in academic and research settings, and national and international, even in India, Russia, Bosnia, and Canada. It also there's an example, the model guided occupational therapy interventions for youth with physical disabilities in schools, and it actually proved useful in a qualitative study of the experiences of a group of youth with disabilities making transition into adulthood. Okay, so the theoretical base, so got to get into the theories here. Well, we know that it is an ecological based based model. Also based on humanistic philosophy, and that goes way back to the OT history. It is client-centered. As far as humanistic philosophy goes, it is client-centered and person-centered, which includes the client autonomy, and that gives them a choice in the matter. Therapeutic partnership is shared, so what that means is that we want to make sure that as we are working with clients that they have a say-so in their therapy. We also provide them or enable them and empower them with their responsibility for their care and rehab. In this model, we ensure that there is contextual congruence. So that recognizing that the environmental conditions and demands are in congruence with the person and their occupations. And in the humanistic philosophy also looks at accessibility and flexibility. Another theory is Lawton's environmental press theory. This theory sets stress and adaptation that depends upon the degree of fit between the environmental demands for occupational performance and the individual's competence to meet these demands. So what that's saying is that whatever's happening in the environment, the person has to be they have to be able to complete whatever the occupation is that they're wanting to complete, and they have the skills to complete them, and that makes the fit right between the person and the environment. We've talked about the ecological systems before, and I have no idea how to say that man's name, but it is the flow theory. We talked a little bit about that in class already, about how when you kind of get in the flow, that means everything is working together. It's the best fit between your ability and any occupational challenge that you might have, and it enhances the likelihood that there is optimal flow experiences. The theoretical foundation also, here's another kind of a deeper dive into the flow theory. It says that it closely matches, or it must slightly exceed, the skill level. So you give them that just right challenge so that they work hard enough to get to it and they don't get bored. It's also an intense and focused concentration on doing in the present moment. I think I told y'all about playing tennis and how when you get into the moment, if you've ever played sports, and you just can't mess up because you're just so focused on doing it. Merging action and awareness. There's a loss of reflective self-consciousness. It's almost like you are in another world kind of thing, or you're out of your mind and watching things happen. It's a sense of control over whatever happens in an unfolding scenario. Then there's also a distortion of temporal experience in which one is unaware of the passing of time. It's like you kind of think about, wow, that didn't take very long, and it might have taken about an hour. It's like time flies when you're having fun. That's kind of the saying for this. Also, experience of activity as intrinsically rewarding and without regard for the end goal. It's almost like you get the feeling, when you have that feeling, you want it again. So kind of like a drug, I guess. If you ever get to that point with the feeling that you're in the flow of something, you want to try to get to there, to that again, but it's almost impossible to make yourself get there. But anyway, moving on. So when you use the PEO, and this is where they take that idea of flow and put it into the PEO and say that finding the best fit between a client's abilities and their occupational challenges enhances their likelihood of optimal flow experiences. So it's not like they're saying it's that exaggerated flow, but the idea behind all those things fitting together makes things work better. Okay, and here's a little more about the ecological theory that guides the model. So the ideas of environmental press that were developed by Lewin and need press by Murray form the basis of an ecological approach. So those press theories were the foundation of where we came up with our ecological theories for that we use in occupational therapy. So the basic premise of environmental press is that stress and adaptation depend on the degree of fit between the environmental demands for occupational performance and the individual's competence to meet these demands. So we mentioned that just a minute ago. They have to have competence in doing it, and the environment has to be just right for it. Then the therapists use PEO to design or enable the best possible fit between the zone of maximum comfort, self-evaluated quality of the experience, or their personal satisfaction. So the only way we know what the best possible fit is to talk to the client and find out what they want. What do they feel like their maximum comfort is, and what's going to make them satisfied. Okay. And so for the client and the zone of maximum performance potential, but from the environment, you get the satisfaction of the environmental demand. So environmental press in rehab settings needs to closely match the client's competencies, or to be structured only slightly above them, presenting the client with a just right challenge. So again, saying that you need to give them just enough challenge to keep them awake. And then Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory views the person as a social agent. interacting with the social and cultural milieu or environment in order to find meaningful roles and occupations. So I kind of envision the person kind of seeking out things in the environment, like whether it be for work or fun or whatever, but the environment is constantly a piece of what they are involved with. The PEO model was founded in Canada. It's Canadian. Mary Law is Canadian. It is holistic, systems oriented. It again reflects the interrelationship of person, environment, and occupation. I know I keep saying that over and over again, but we got to say it. And the result or the outcome that we're looking for is occupational performance. Same thing that we were talking about with occupational behavior. Okay. So here's the model that we have and that we use, and it's conceptualized as the person and his or her environment and occupations are dynamically interacting over time. So if you look at the picture here, you see the person on the left and well, the person's on the top of all three of them, and then their the performance is changing throughout the lifetime. So early on, maybe the performance, the occupational performance is more congruent, whereas maybe they had something happen there in the midlife and it caused an incongruence, and then it looks like it might have gotten a little better towards the end there and as they're going on. So the degree of overlap of those circles equals the extent of congruence. So the more they overlap, the better off they are. And the middle here is the that represents the occupational performance or the dynamic experience of a person engaged in occupation within their environment. And it happens over time. And then between the three spheres, or it happened, I'm sorry, within an environment over time, between the three spheres. The closer the spheres, and I can't say that word either, the closer the spheres overlap, the greater the degree of harmony or fit. So here's another example of what it looks like when it's taken out of the other larger picture, and talking about the quality of a person's experience with regards to their level of satisfaction and functioning is the outcome of the fit between the person, environment, occupation, transaction. And the focus of this model is on enabling occupation by improving the person, environment, occupation fit. And this is just an example here where it shows you some questions to ask, like for the person, if they've had any injuries, maybe the height, their height, future family plans, finances, desired aesthetics, what is their strength, and then for their environment, things that they would look at would be public transport, climate, home access, home storage, urban versus rural terrain, footpath quality, car size, occupation, what will you do, shopping, jogging, traveling, transporting pets, wrangling a toddler. So those are some examples of what it might look like. Okay. Then here it's just talking about how the PEO model and the Canadian model of occupational performance, they're complementary and they share a lot of the same terminology. They're both Canadian. They both emphasize that occupational performance is shaped by the dynamic interdependence of persons, occupations, and environments. And the person can refer to an individual client or a group of clients or an organization. Okay, we're going to break down the person a little bit. And the person, like I said, can refer to an individual client, a group of clients, or an organization. And these are the pieces or the constructs below a person, or how to divide the person up. Physical, cognitive, affective, sensory, and spiritual. And so your physical constructs could be a person's strength, their energy, flexibility, range of motion, endurance, pain. Cognitive construct could be thinking, reasoning, memory, perception, communication, motor planning. And then affective is more about their feelings and attitudes, motivation, self-concept, and relationship. And then sensory is just sensory, how, feel, smell, move, feel, smell, proprioception, kinesthesia, that type of thing. And then the spiritual component is a pervasive life force, manifestation of a higher self, source of will and self-determination, and a sense of meaning, purpose, and connectedness that people experience in the context of their environment. So this is the experience of meaning. It doesn't necessarily mean it's religious, but it is it is more of a pervasive life force, higher self feeling. Okay. Environment, it has physical environment, social, cultural, institutional, and virtual. And in the physical environment, you might consider the house or your home, a classroom, a workplace, and then the natural outdoor environment. There could be a social environment, which would include family, co-workers, community organizations. Then cultural environment could be religious, ethnic, political factors. And then your institutional environment. And the difference here with the political and social is your system. So institutional means system-wide, where under cultural, it's just the factors of the system. And then you have virtual, such as airwaves and computers. Okay. Then we get to the occupation, and with the PEO, it breaks down occupation into occupation, task, and activity, and in that order. So occupation is the larger, the overarching occupation or activity that wouldn't be activity because that's in there, but it's the overarching occupation work that you do. Task would be a smaller piece of that, and then activity is a tiny piece of the task. So for instance, if you were going to not ride a bike, if you're going to wash your clothes, okay, laundry, you're going to do laundry, that is an occupation. And the task might be separating the laundry, okay? And then an activity of that might be simply knowing the colors or the types of clothing that go into separating that laundry. Okay, I think that maybe that will help. If it doesn't, we can clear that up during class. But occupations are divided up into, these are some examples: the self-care, productivity, work, leisure, rest, and sleep. And of course, you've got others that are in your OTPF. There's some new terms that are in the book: occupational load and or overload. So the occupational load is not only the physical aspects of a work activity, but also the number of different roles or tasks and occupations that a person undertakes, wants, needs, or is expected to do. So what that means is it's the capacity, it's like their work capacity. How much can they tolerate? How much can they do before they get to overload? Which we are all feeling a lot of that right now. And then there's the occupational performance, which is that outcome. and it results from the interaction of all three components, the person, environment, and occupation. And the occupational therapist's unique role is one of enabling occupation. And the client-centered approach emphasizes that occupational performance is best defined by each individual based on his or her experience rather than therapist observation. So the client's perception of his or her own occupational performance determines the degree of satisfaction. And that's why occupational therapists need to communicate and collaborate with the client when setting their goals according to client priorities and designing interventions that have meaning for the client, both personally and within his or her culture or social group. So to accomplish this, therapeutic engagement with the client is the primary task in occupational therapy. And goal accomplishment in therapy and client satisfaction with the outcome both rely on the quality of the therapeutic relationship. So we have to make sure that we aren't putting what we think the client needs on top of what they really think that they need. And when we're looking at the occupational performance, we are looking at the overarching end point and wanting to achieve that just right fit of the occupation, person, and environment. And that could be from a spatial perspective, or it could be from a temporal. As we know, this model is through the lifespan. Okay. So our transactive dimensions. What that means is as the client interacts with the environment and their occupation, they have the chance to self-rate. So they are determining whether they have met their goals or not, or if they're satisfied with their performance or not. And these things may change over the lifespan because their ability could get better or worse. So that's why it's transactive, and it's transactive across all dimensions, and their performance and their satisfaction could change. So the client may need to renegotiate their ideas of what satisfaction and competency is. That's kind of what that's all about. Okay. So the function and dysfunction in this model. Function is when the person, environment, occupation are in flow and have balance. And it's meeting the patient's needs, and the patient is happy. They feel self-confident, and all is going well. But dysfunction is when there's a barrier to occupational performance, resulting in an imbalance in the person, environment, and occupational transactions. Okay. So what do we do about it? Well, for change, the PEO assumption of motivation is toward personal growth and self-actualization. So what that's saying is the client is motivated through their own self-actualization or their own growth. So if they're wanting to get better, they will do that. They will be motivated because they want to do something. But then we can help them or enable them by collaborating with them and setting goals and enabling occupation through these type of interactions or interventions, such as adapting things, advocating for them, coaching, collaborating, consulting, coordinating, designing, educating, engaging, and specializing. Okay. So to start with, we need to evaluate the client to find out what's going on, what do we need to work on. And so to do that, we typically use the COPM because that's what goes along with this model. Again, Canadian, and it came out about the same time. So the COPM looks at 3 different areas. They look at the self-care area, productivity, and leisure. And y'all will be seeing this at some point, how to do the COPM. So interventions, once we've assessed the client and figured out what we need to do with them, this is some of the things that might be worked on. There should be, or these are some things that must be there for them to do interventions. So there should be a presence of an occupational challenge, and that occurs whenever the ability and or opportunity to engage in occupations that a person considers necessary or important. So what they're saying is it's got to be important to the person, or they probably will not participate. And then the need for occupational enablement, possibility of solutions that enable occupation emanates from the presence of activity limitations or participation restrictions. So we need to make sure that we can get around those restrictions, and we teach them how to do that through different compensation methods. Client-specific goals and challenges and solutions, and client-centered enablement. So from a client-centered perspective, the client's own repertoire of occupations, roles, patterns, and goals becomes the focus of intervention for OT enablement. So it's saying that we use what they want to do, what they're interested in, and that's what we use in therapy. So a multidisciplinary knowledge base is another part of, these are kind of the assumptions for intervention, and it's needed to embrace the complexity of occupations within the PEO framework, including not only person-centered abilities and disabilities, but also physical and social environments, contextual elements such as life stage and economic and political influences, and the multi-layered occupations that demand specific physical, cognitive, and psychosocial capabilities. Lots of words right there. What it's saying is the clients are complex, and we need to be able to analyze it enough to know what the complexities are so that we can intervene with them and get them what they need. Then there's the reasoning process that can deal with this complexity. So the OT has to understand the complex transactional relationships of the PEO, the person to the environment, environment to the occupation, and the person to the occupation. And the application of the model within the therapeutic relationship that allows the occupational therapist to collaboratively engage with the client in mutual problem solving to remove barriers, adjust the fit, and facilitate the process of occupational engagement. So again, very client-centered. We are enabling the client to meet their goals. We are helping to motivate the client to meet their goals. This is a client-centered approach, and there's 4 stages of intervention for occupational therapy within that client-centered approach. Biomedical rehab. This is limited to optimizing physical, mental, and social skills development and performance. So that's typically not what we want to do, right? We want to be more holistic and client-centered. Not to say that we don't do this, we do, but we just need to make sure that that's not the complete focus. Then being client-centered is enabling the client enabling client-directed occupational goals to support self-esteem, problem-solving, learning, and mastery through occupational engagement. So we're using occupations to help the client meet their own self-set goals. Then community rehab helps, it evaluates, there's an evaluation of the environment and facilitating removal of barriers, including advocacy and overcoming attitudinal obstacles. So what this is saying, these are kind of like 4 levels of intervention. So where you start off with the biomedical, which is more illness in the hospital, then client-centered, maybe looking a little bit more like inpatient rehab type stuff. Community rehab is more about outpatient, and then your independent living is going to be more about like your home health type setting or intervention. So and with independent living, you're advocating for accessibility to housing and employment, healthcare, transportation, those type of things, those higher functioning IADLs. Okay, so all of those things that that last slide, it just specifies that OT begins at the lowest level and moves the client or the group or the population towards wellness and prevention and well-being. So that's why it started with the biopsychosocial. Okay. Then the research on this model, there's quite a bit of research on this model, and mainly because it's pretty simple, right? I mean, you have 3 circles. It is across the lifespan, but there are 3 circles, and it's pretty easy to understand. So the research that's been out there has been, it's in all areas. So it's not just in like outpatient or just in acute care or whatever. It's across all facilities and across all ages. Okay, so we talked a little bit about what we were doing. We talked about the client, and we talked about the change and motivation, and we talked about assessment and intervention. So we've talked about the process without saying we were talking about the process. But here we go. This is similar to the PEOP, where they have a full-blown process. This one it's kind of a milder process, kind of just a simple, where you first identify what the performance strengths and problems are by talking to the client, right? And then you begin your assessment of the things that you decide you need to assess, which could be performance components or occupations or any type of environmental areas. Then after you've done that, you talk to them and you've done your assessments, then you're going to synthesize or bring all the information together in a transactional framework and develop an intervention plan with the client. So after you've done all of the evaluation and assessment, then you put what all you find in. You can either do it physically on a piece of paper or in your head. You're going to put on there what you found from the person, the environment, and the occupation. So, what goes in the person slot? What goes in the environment slot? What about the occupation? And in each one of those, you will have a strength and maybe a weakness or a support or a barrier, however you want to call it. So maybe function, dysfunction would be what you'd put in the person, because that's kind of what's going on there. And then you want to see if everything is equal or fit, or if there's nothing negative out in any of them, then we would assume that they would be of the good fit. If there are problems, then there probably would be issues that we need to fix. So if you're looking at this one here, and here's occupation at the bottom, and we have environment at the top. And if something in the environment was a barrier to the occupation, you would see a grayed in area here, or that would depict that. Then if maybe the person had some problems with their environment, then you would see the grayed in area here. And then here's your occupation and person if there's problems there. So you can kind of get a visual of where the problems might be. Okay. So the PEO will facilitate practice by considering the completion of human functioning and experience. I'm sorry, not the completion. Considering the complexities of human function and experience. Then also it offers a systematic approach to the analysis of occupational performance issues. And it expands the scope of practice and options for intervention. So just because there's so much other things to think about in there, it does give you more options. It facilitates communication within and outside the profession. It gives us some language that we can talk about with other people, especially because it does use some of the ICF stuff too. And it's supporting the pursuit and continued development of a client-centered and community-based practice. Okay. So in summary, a large component of occupational therapy practice involves complex issues that cannot be dealt with as easily. So for these in particular, this model will serve to enhance intervention to benefit the client. And the fit between person, environment, and occupation, the person, environment, occupation model places a greater emphasis on the complexity of relationships of people performing occupation within broad environments. This model helps facilitate a shift to an emphasis on occupation from an emphasis on performance components. Okay. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope that helps understand some of the PEO model, and I'm looking forward to Monday and all of you guys watching the presentations on Monday. So this will be uploaded to the content area in week 5 of the of Blackboard. I will I think I'll also upload it under resources. If you go to information and under the resources tab, I will also upload it there. But you can find this in your week 5 section. Okay. All right. I will see you guys Monday. Have a great weekend.